Welcome to the podcast for and about Colorado Springs. I'm your host, Brittany Felix, and every Monday through Friday, I'll be talking about a different aspect relating to the Springs, including upcoming events, restaurant reviews, local business spotlights, media coverage about the Springs, public works projects, local activities, answering your questions about the city, and much, much more. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the updates. And also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find links to all of those social media accounts at springspodcast.com/social media. The Colorado Springs podcast is proudly sponsored by Elevation Hydration. Elevation Hydration is the only hydration therapy clinic serving Colorado Springs, and they are dedicated to helping you elevate your life. They use intravenous vitamin therapy to help athletes needing a boost of energy or help recovering after a tough competition, people experiencing cold-like symptoms or dehydration from the flu, anyone needing to recover quickly from a rough night out. I'm looking at you, college kids. And just anyone wanting a healthy alternative to preventative care. They have a wide variety of hydration packages to help address whatever your needs are. They're conveniently located inside Lush Beauty Lounge at 812 Village Center Drive, and if you mention this podcast during your visit, you'll receive $10 off any hydration package. To learn more about Elevation Hydration or to schedule an appointment, visit springspodcast.com/hydrate. Welcome to episode 7 of the Colorado Springs podcast. First off, I just want to say that I am recording this on Monday the 9th, so as you're listening to this, that will have been yesterday. And if you were in town yesterday, you know that we are having crazy amounts of wind today. So you might hear a little bit of that in the background. It's kind of rattling our windows, but, such is life when you live here in the mountains. So I do apologize for that if any of that comes through and I'm not able to remove it when I'm editing. In today's episode, I am going to talk about housing here in Colorado Springs. If you have not had a chance to listen to last Friday's episode with my husband, I highly recommend that you do so, just so that you'll know who the heck I'm referring to whenever I talk about him in the future. But if you did listen, you'll know that his main piece of advice he wanted to offer for anyone looking to move to Colorado Springs was about just how expensive it is to live here. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today with an emphasis on the housing part of that. So just for a little frame of reference, this is obviously going to be relative of wherever you are currently living or have moved from, but we are from the Midwest. Born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. He actually lived in a smaller town outside of Indianapolis. And we've lived all over. I lived in Montana for a little while. We lived in Arkansas for a few years. And we've lived in various cities throughout Indiana. But really in the Midwest, kind of in general, housing prices and rent are not that bad, especially when you consider it against places like Denver or New York or LA or any of those kind of major metropolitan areas. Now, granted, if we had lived in downtown Indianapolis in the kind of, hip urban area, it would have been considerably more expensive. But we were in the suburbs, and so our rent was generally about, I would say around $800 for a nice 2-bedroom apartment that was clean, safe, had the amenities that you needed, just kind of a nice place to live. And because we were actually a little bit adventurous and looking for more of an investment property back in Indiana, of course, we actually purchased a foreclosure property. And the house that we ended up buying actually really only needed some cosmetic work. So we ended up with a 2,000 square foot house, 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room, eating kitchen, 2.5 baths, a giant loft upstairs, a full laundry room, 2-car garage, nice backyard, all of that. And we only ended up paying, I think between $600 and $700 with all the insurance that you need. And there was like $300 a year in HOA fees. So then we moved out to Colorado Springs and have experienced the increase in price here, which is why my husband was offering that as his main piece of advice for anyone considering moving here. We obviously knew before we decided to move here that it was going to be more expensive. We did our research. We didn't just come out here blind. And we had a bit of an interesting challenge. We were actually on the road at the time. I've mentioned before that we spent a little over 2 months traveling around in our RV before moving to Colorado Springs. And so we were actually getting everything set up while we were on the road. I made all the phone calls from a campground in Las Vegas, actually, inquiring about apartments here. And so at the time, we technically did not have a place of residence. We didn't own or rent. Neither one of us technically had jobs, and we had 2 60-pound dogs. Each one of those individually kind of makes getting an apartment a little bit difficult. All 3 of them combined makes it nearly impossible. So we pretty much were stuck with whatever we could find, and that is how we are in our current apartment, which I absolutely loathe. I will not say the name of it because we are still living here, and I don't want to make things worse than they already are. But I can say that we are paying more than we have ever paid to live anywhere, and it is by far the worst apartment we've ever lived in. So we are just counting down the days until we can get out of here and move into a different place now that we are a little bit more established, and I have, my own company that I run, and my husband is working here in town, and we actually have a current place that we are renting that they can refer back to and make sure that we do pay our rent. Things will be hopefully a little bit easier for us when it comes time to move. But we're still going to face the same issue we faced the first time around of there just not being enough housing here. If you're a current resident, you already know people are flocking to Colorado in general and also to Colorado Springs. So there is a major shortage right now of places to live and rent, especially at rates that are affordable for the average person. So I just want to talk about some statistics here that I found on areavibes.com. It kind of breaks down cities all over the country and talks about various things about it and just essentially gives it a grade or a rating on the different factors that make living in a city what it is. So livability, education, amenities, employment, cost of living, housing, crime, weather, all those kind of various things. So according to them, says the median home price in Colorado Springs is 19% higher than the national average. And it also says that the number of renter-occupied households in Colorado Springs is 16% higher than the national average. So we have higher home prices and a lot more renters, which makes sense that those would go hand in hand and correlate. Now there are, of course, new places being built all the time. My father actually owns his own construction company in Indiana, and he has contacts here in Colorado that are absolutely begging him to send some crews out here because they just cannot keep up with the demands. They cannot keep up with the rate with which people are moving to Colorado. And again, Colorado Springs is not immune from that. So what I really want to make sure anyone considering moving here realizes is that not only are you going to pay more, but you're going to be competing. You are going to be fighting tooth and nail for a place to live here. Now, obviously, if you have a bunch of money to throw at buying a house or renting a place, it's not going to be quite so much of a concern for you because you're going to be able to afford things that a lot of other people aren't. But for the average person, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to find a place to live. So you need to really, really do your research. Make sure that you are prepared to pay the prices for a house or for a rental property. And I strongly encourage you to have a job lined up before you move here. I know that can be more difficult, but that is a huge, huge, huge factor for these property management companies. There have been so many people that have moved out to Colorado and not been able to find the work that they want for whatever reason, and this has actually led to a bit of a homeless problem here in at least Colorado Springs. So they want to make sure that they're going to get their money. And if you don't have a job lined up, that really concerns them. And when you're one out of several applications they have, they're obviously going to go with the one who's already got a job. So that's something I strongly encourage you to try and have figured out before you come here. And, do your research at all these websites, apartments.com, forrent.com. I mean, there's so many that you can go through. So do your research, narrow down your properties, contact them, and as I was told during our apartment hunt, if you find one that's willing to take you, do not wait. If you're doing all of this from out of the city or out of state and you don't have a chance to look at the properties first, well, you might wind up in the situation that we're in, where you kind of feel like you got duped, where actually you were outright lied to, and the facility misrepresented what it really is, and you may be miserable for a few months. So what I recommend is signing the shortest lease that they have available. That way, just in case you do get here and you hate it, you're only here for a few months as opposed to an entire year, which is exactly what we did. And I can tell you that I am so incredibly thankful that we did that. Now, according to that same Area Vibes website, it says that the median rent asked is $888. So just kind of compare that with what you're doing right now. I can tell you that because we have pets, so we do have a little bit of a pet deposit on that, our rent for a very small one-bedroom apartment in a terrible complex is $825 a month. So just to give you a little bit of a frame of reference there. So that's actually going to wrap it up for today. Just wanted to make sure that I addressed this situation with anybody considering moving to Colorado Springs. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am going to provide some resources in the show notes from the Colorado Springs Housing Authority and also the housing information section on the Colorado Springs City Government's website. You can find those resources at springspodcast.com/007. And of course, those are the actual numbers 007. And before I leave, I want to invite you to rate this podcast on iTunes if you're enjoying it, or do a review on my Facebook page. All you have to do to find that is just search for Colorado Springs Podcast on Facebook. And if you like any of these episodes, please share them out. I want to help spread the word about this podcast. Make sure other residents are finding it. Share it with people who are considering moving to this city. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Facebook and also Twitter and Instagram. To find those links, you can just go to springspodcast.com/social media, and I'll have links to all of my social media accounts. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I cannot wait to have you back tomorrow.